Discipline. It's a loaded word. Some people think pain, others self-control. I have it associated with the 7th grade principal's office, but is there such a thing as spiritual discipline? If so, what does it mean? Are there any practical benefits to it?
Napoleon Hill, legendary philosopher and author of one of the best-selling books of all time, Think and Grow Rich, says this about discipline.
Is the means by which the Creator provided us with a method of embracing and using the only thing over which we have unchallengeable control, the power of our own thoughts.
That was Napoleon Hill, who some say was the Abraham of personal growth and self-help. He consistently focuses his message on the power of the mind, our character, and discipline.
Perhaps Judaism can weigh in and explain how integrity and character manifest themselves in our spiritual lives.
And now, live from Jerusalem, you're listening to Israel Inspired Radio. Here are your hosts, Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
Ari, it's a new week. We're back together. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate you welcoming me to my show. And I look forward to welcoming you next week to your show.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
You look
Thank
good.
God. I feel good. I'm a little hazy. My head is spinning a little bit. No real reason.
You bump into things randomly as you're walking?
I do. I talk to trees and other inanimate objects. But that's just trying to fit into the landscape here in Jerusalem. There's a lot of special things going on.
I did something really unique today. I was invited to speak to an old age home in Jerusalem. And when I was first asked to speak, I really didn't want to go. I know I'm a terrible person for saying that. I just have so much to do. But I did it as a chesed and a favor to my sister-in-law who volunteers and even works at this old age home. She asked me to come and speak, and I said, fine.
Where was the home? What type of people were they?
The most amazing people in the world. They're all predominantly English speakers, from many of them born in European countries, somehow made their way to America, somehow made their way back to Israel. And it was one of the highlights of my life. I didn't really know my grandparents. I don't have that much interaction with elderly, and they are amazing. And what turned out, what I thought was going to be, sort of just an annoying favor that I was doing for someone, ended up being the most enriching, inspiring things I've done all day.
So I want to ask you why, but for me, I have this thing. I like making people laugh. I like bringing joy. That's why when I go to synagogue, I like bringing the little candies for the kids, because the joy that a little piece of candy brings them is equivalent roughly to a new BMW for an adult.
Right.
I find that with elderly, that what brings them the most joy are questions and genuine, authentic interest, because they're walking around with novella of wisdom, of life stories. They've lived through some of the most fascinating times in world history, right? And they're now just sitting there. Nobody wants to hear them. They're so everyone's distracted with their iPhones and iPads, and just to go there and show interest in them. What did you talk to them about?
Well, I really was just there. Honestly, I said my goal here is to make these old people laugh as much as I possibly can. And I know that that's not really my expertise.
Sometimes you get on a roll.
Right, sometimes. But
Were
really,
you on a roll here?
I was they were an easy audience. They were really happy for me to come. They'd all watched Tuesday Night Live. They'd all known who we were.
You set me up for next week, right?
Indeed. And so they were so happy for me to be there. It was just like waiting for me to make them laugh. And I thought, as long as I can just bring these people joy and happiness, win. I don't need to deliver a message of depth and meaning and transform their consciousness. I really just want to show them that I care and that I came to make them happy. And hopefully if meaningful things come out of my mouth, that'll be great. But ultimately, I just wanted them to be happy. But at the end, I was talking to some of them, and they all lived through amazing times that we can't imagine. Before the state of Israel, during the Holocaust, fighting for the British Army, counterfeiting visas, getting Jews to Israel. I mean, the most amazing stories, heroes that are just quietly sitting in an old age home. They should have books written about them. They're so interesting. And just to have the opportunity to meet with them and talk with them, it really inspired me for this upcoming show as we talk about character, integrity, and what I call spiritual
Well,
discipline.
let me ask you, do you feel when you look at yourself and our generation, do you see a difference as far as the material we're made from, the character, the fortitude?
Yes, we are cut from a different cloth.
What do you give that to?
It's almost as if the times that people live in create the heroes. It's that a responsiveness to such a calamity as the Holocaust, the calamity of Arab countries coming and trying to destroy the newly founded Jewish state, fighting them off in 1948, demands leaders and activists that are really ready to risk it all because the stakes are so high.
That's the thing. I think that many in our generation that I see just on the streets here in Jerusalem, I feel like they have tremendous character, but nothing, at least I feel in me, nothing has forced it out.
Right.
But I think the future is different.
The potential
Tremendous.
lies within us here, but we haven't yet had the time to expose the light. And just being
And that's
with
what
them.
challenges essentially do. They convert potential energy to kinetic or active energy. It's, we were just speaking the other night about the challenges we're facing right now, and you were so happy. And you said, I've always had this within me, but now I have the opportunity to bring it out and make it real in my personality, bring it into the world.
Well, I wanted to talk this week about discipline, spiritual discipline in particular, because I think that's one of the things that makes Judaism unique, in that we're not just an individual reaching out to God, but rather we believe that God is reaching out to a nation and calling us to respond. And then to be true to that call is to be Jewish. And perhaps halakha, Jewish law, the Ten Commandments, the biblical narrative that we have is that within our actions, we're able to express the divine. That we can do something in this world that somehow manifests the will of the creator of the universe, how he would want the world to be. Meaning science, and we've spoken about this in the past, sort of tells us that the world of what is. This is the world that we live in. It works like this. There are these economic problems. There are these economic pluses. There's this law, that law. Here is the world in which we live. What the Torah does is saying, well, there is a world that ought to be. And when we express our lives in action in this world, we're sort of bringing the world one step closer, I think, to the world that ought to be, and it expresses the divine in action. And the reason why I say this is a lot of these old people, they weren't religious. They weren't observant Jews. They were very religious Jews, but they weren't very observant Jews. And their actions and their stories, in my mind, had the same ability to express the divine, to express freedom, to champion the rights of the Jewish people throughout the ages. Doesn't necessarily mean I need a codified law to do it, but it needs to express itself in action.
Well, I sort
that's
of see,
clear.
halakha is a word we'll be speaking about throughout the show, and that's Jewish law. But really, what does halakha mean? It means the walk or the way to go through this world. And I sort of see it like there's fixed and variable Jewish law. And where the fixed Jewish law is the Torah, about the ways we conduct our lives day to day. And then the variable Jewish law, I think, requires being sensitive to the calling of the generation or the calling of the times.
Or even the calling of the moment.
Even the calling of the moment. That's right, down to the calling of the moment. But when I look at the elderly in these homes that I've visited as well and spoken with them, I feel like it was a generation of people, at least the ones we meet here, are ones that really answered that calling. They stepped up to the plate. I mean, by the very nature of the fact they're here, it shows that they didn't run to America. They came here and answered that calling. They smuggled weapons in. It wasn't a calling of the intricacies of fulfilling Jewish law, but it was really just about saving Jewish lives at the time.
Well, I guess here's the question that I'm going to pose to you, is that in other spiritual practices, particularly the New Age, particularly religions of the Far East, action isn't that important. Rather, meditation, transcendence, good intentions. In Christianity, belief is very important. What you believe and what you think really determines if you're going to go to heaven or hell. Where Judaism, it seems to me, cares about what you believe. Like you are not allowed to worship idols. But on the focus is so much more on action and discipline to keep that action. That it's not like, well, thou shalt not murder, on Wednesdays, it's a constant. You are never allowed to take someone else's life, even if you feel a passionate desire to kill someone. That's, of course, an extreme example. You're never allowed to do it. It demands constant recalibration in our lives, and it is always expressed in action. And I want to know, why do you think that's necessarily important?
So that's a fantastic question. Can I really take a swing at this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so my feeling is there's a new type of worldview that's being developed here in Israel that's, I think, just a product of, let's say there was a fish flopping on the seashore for 100 or thousands of years, and then you take it and you put it back in the water and it's able to swim. Us returning to Israel is like we're swimming in our water. We're back in our nature and our habit. We're seeing things much more holistically. And I would say start with physical discipline. Right? Rav Cook says that the foundation of repentance is physical fitness. Why? Because the physical and the spiritual are not disconnected. That sort of duality is not something that we experience now in Israel, and that's not part of our worldview. There's one unified whole. So just like in physical fitness, you can have the greatest of motivations and intentions, and believe me, I'm that guy. But if you don't actually get out and run, and you don't actually work and do the actual actions, it doesn't mean anything. It's just abstract.
See, at that time, it's interesting that you mentioned Rav Kook. From what I know, the fact that he brought physical fitness, health, exercise into the realm of the spiritual, saying, in fact, that it's foundational to healthy spiritual being, was a revolution in and of itself. And boy, he took a lot of flack from it at that time. Because at that time, during the exile, Jews expressed their spirituality by reading, learning, and praying, because they were in the shtetl in Poland. As Rav Kook returned to Israel, it was almost an immediate inspiration, saying, no. The physical and the spiritual can no longer be disconnected. They are two parts of the same whole, and really brought that back into reality. And I think that you're right. But I could say that, on one hand, physical fitness demands physical actions, but spirituality demands spiritual action. And spiritual action is in my thoughts, in my prayers, in my intentions, in my beliefs. And it doesn't necessarily translate over into spiritual life. And I wonder if you think that there's another key, specifically why it helps in our spiritual dimension.
So I think we had this debate a few shows ago, and I think the ultimate answer, the truest answer that I can get to now, is that it meets somewhere in the middle. On the one hand, it requires a realization. There's two very different ways to view the world. You could view it, just the other day, there was an incident you and I were involved in, and there were such radically different ways we could have viewed that. One is with cynicism, and the other was with optimism and giving the benefit of the doubt. And I think that when we are in this world, there's two very different approaches. One is breaking through the duality of the world and the dualism and the materialism and seeing the spiritual truth that is hiding behind all of it. But the other is actually just living the way your actions would manifest if you understood that truth fully, if you've internalized it. And I think you meet in the middle. You know, you were saying a few shows ago, I don't remember exactly the context, but you said, you just got to do it. And I said, yeah, but the paradigm shift, you got to do the paradigm shift. So I think it's both. On the one hand, you got to work on the paradigm shift, but on the other hand, you got to just do the actions to bring them together in the middle.
Well,
does that make any sense?
It does make sense. I'll tell you what I've been thinking about a lot lately. I've encountered a few, let's call them, for lack of a better word, hippies. And these hippies, I love them. They're the sweetest people. They're seeking God. They're so spiritual. They're just lovely, lovely people, and I love them. But there is a danger with their worldview. And the danger is it's almost a mystical craving that they seek in their spiritual life. And sometimes spirituality, if it's not expressed outside, then you just may be delighting in yourself and worshiping the experience inside you. If it doesn't occur outside you, and there's nothing that's happening externally, an expression outside of, then you may just be sort of worshiping yourself in your own spiritual quest for your own spirituality and your own delight. And then that's not really worshiping Hashem. In some ways, it's really just delighting in yourself. Right.
So that is always the fine line that we walk. Is Rabbi Nachman says, Gesher, the world is a very narrow bridge. So what does a mitzvah mean? Then we're talking about spiritual discipline. What does spiritual discipline mean? Doing the mitzvot. A lot of people define them as commandments, but I remember a long time ago, Jeremy, you taught me it means to join, right? To bring together. And so just like with anything else in the world, there's the chance of making the means into the ends. And if our purpose in doing a commandment, a mitzvah, is to come together with God, to join ourselves with God, then that's a wonderful thing. But the minute we lose track of what it is and it becomes an end in and of itself, which is something that happens in Judaism a lot.
Right.
A lot. It's one of the biggest dangers within Judaism, is that we could get lost in the commandments and they become ends in and of themselves. We forget why we're doing them, and they become literally idolatry.
Right.
The commandments become idolatry. So I think what you're saying about, you call them hippies, that there is a very fine line. And I think we all are on the spectrum of making, God into what we want him to be and having him serve us in some way.
Well, I'll tell you something else. The Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, one of the greatest Kabbalists of all times, prolific writer. He wrote Kabbalistic works, an amazing, amazing thinker. And the culmination of all of his works, he said, if you want to truly integrate everything that I've ever taught about the mystical universe, the ways of the world, the angelic forces, everything, read this book. And the book is called Mesilat Yesharim. It's a book about good midot. It's a book about good attributes and good actions.
Right. It's a book that the Vilna Gaon, one of the greatest sages, said there's not one superfluous, extraneous word in the entire book.
Yeah, so what was amazing about what he was saying is that all of the spirituality, I mean, he dove into the depths of the spiritual universe in Judaism. And when he came out and he said, if you want to really understand everything that I've taught, read the book about how to be a really good person, how to do good, stay away from evil, be humble, all the attributes of how to live your life. And I was thinking about when I was in my early 20s, and I was learning how to become more productive and learning time management and learning how to really build myself into the man that I wanted to be. One of the audios that I used to listen to was a guy named Brian Tracy. Ari introduced me to Brian Tracy. And he said, if you want to be organized, you want to be productive, you want to get through law school, you want to do this, you want to do this, here's the guy that he will organize your life and set your priorities straight.
I liked him because he wasn't a motivation guy. He was really a workflow.
Practical, yeah.
Systematized.
How do you get things done? And one of the things that he said that just stuck with me until now, I mean, this is now well over 10 years ago, but he said that the definition of character is someone who is able to follow through with their commitment once the inspiration is gone when they made that commitment.
Right, the mood in which it was determined has passed.
The mood in which it has passed,
right.
And you're still doing it. That's the definition of character. And I said, how beautiful it is, because I know a lot of spiritual seekers, and they believe, and they live in a constant, almost paranoia. Am I good? Am I bad? Does God love me? Does God not love me? Is my belief strong enough? Is my belief weak enough? What's going to happen? And here is a way to know about the character of your faith. If you have a set of rules and principles that you commit to, which the Jewish people committed to at Sinai, and they said, this is how we understand good in the world, then even though that mood is gone, even though that prophetic experience is gone, even though the perception of God may be closer, may be farther away, spiritual character and spiritual discipline is built up even when we don't want to go give our money to the poor, we give it anyway. I'll give you an example. When I was invited to speak to this old age home, or when I'm invited more often to hospitals, I don't like hospitals. They freak me out. I don't like. I'm nervous. I might get sick. There's a lot of sick people. I don't like hospitals. But very often I'm called to go to the hospital to visit people that are sick, God forbid. And so when I feel that internal saying, ooh, I don't really want to go, I immediately fight through that and saying, who am I here for? Am I here for my own feelings of how I don't like hospitals, or is my job to go and visit that sick person? When it's expressed in action, then the commitment that I made, that I know that there's a value to visiting sick people, it's a commandment in the Torah that I believe in, it doesn't matter what the mood is at that point. That spiritual discipline allows me to fulfill the character that I want to build in the world.
So if I were to say that I am an example to be followed for discipline of any sort, that would be totally insane. But there is one element of my life on a spiritual. There's a number of them that I'm really proud of, but one of them is tefillin. You know, phylacteries, putting them on every morning. I was just talking about making the means the end. There's times that I go to pray, and it's just words. It's just empty words to me. I feel like I'm a Catholic priest speaking Latin, and I don't even know what it means. But every morning, I missed one day in the past 16 years. Have I missed one day of tefillin? And I will put it on even if it means that I know I'm going to speak empty words and say empty things and not feel it. Those days are going to happen. But it's my way of weighing in and saying, I'm putting it on. Like, this is a wedding ring. I'm being loyal to this. It's not only when I feel inspired. It's every day. It's not just what does quality time come from? With friends, family. It comes from quantity time. I believe it's the same with God, and that's me weighing in and saying that I'm here. So that's something I'm proud of. But on the flip side,
well, can I just make a point? I love that idea that you just said now, that the tefillin is your wedding ring, because that's actually one of the psukim that we say.
And I'm betrothed to you.
Right. And so specifically in marriage, there are some times where you're in love with your other, and sometimes you just can't handle it. And those two realities exist. But if we were to make decisions based on the moods or perceptions that we have at one moment, we may marry and divorce our wife 3 or 4 times a day. And the idea is saying that, no. There may be ups, there may be downs, but every morning when I wake up to put on my tefillin, it doesn't matter. I'm here for the long haul. And that creates real character and relationship in human life and in the spiritual life.
Yeah, that's the holistic perspective we're getting here in Israel. But in addition, just a flip side, but on the same subject of praying and of davening, that we have a certain liturgy. I go around the world and I meet a whole lot of Christians. And they have a very inspiring way of praying. Before they sit down to eat, they just thank God for what's going on that day and for who they're with. And it's really, really, really beautiful.
And present.
And it's present, it's real, it's interactive, it's beautiful. And I think it's, in some ways, it was something that we have historically has been a fundamental part of Judaism. But when we went out to the exile, it became codified in just liturgy. Right, and I've actually started integrating elements of that within myself also, just being present and just talking to God. And then I finish with the liturgy. But the liturgy, I think, is important for this subject of spiritual discipline. Because what does the liturgy itself do for us? The words in the prayers. It helps us realize what we're supposed to want. What we're supposed to want to do, to build the temple, to reestablish Jewish law, to ingather the exiles. It's like, imagine going to the gym and you just have no idea. You pick up this weight, you pick up that weight. But saying, if this is your goal, is to be physically fit, these are the ways to do it. And it's like a way for us to put our will in line with what our will should be, that would give us the greatest joy. And that's the one thing I would wind it all together with for myself. It's the idea that halacha is Hashem's love letter to us. God is giving us his love letter of what brings him joy. Because sometimes the greatest thing someone could do if you really love them is tell you how to make them happy, right? But I think the real question is, what is Hashem and who are we? That if we see it like we used to see it, where God is some sort of force and power outside of us that is imposing these rules and regulations on us, it's hard to feel that fulfilled by it. But if we understand that there's nothing but godliness in the world, and we are a manifestation of God like a ray of sunlight is to the sun, then by us fulfilling this Jewish law or halakha, we're able to manifest the godliness within ourselves in the most beautiful way. And it just brings us joy. It's not some favor we're doing for God. It's bringing us joy within ourselves. It's like, in my mind, it's like an ox that's out in the field slamming its head into a tree, and then you put a yoke on it. Now, what does the yoke do? On the one hand, it seems like you're trying to control the ox, but now the ox is able to accomplish something. It's able to actually do things in the world, and there's this entire field of produce that the ox was able to accomplish. But in our case, it's not for someone else, it's for ourselves. That's my personal experiential take.
So the yoke of heaven is really to bring out our spiritual potential like an ox with a yoke. It allows us to express it in the world. I think that's beautiful. I'm still trapped in your tefillin idea. I think it's so important Because to me, spiritual growth happens not when you're in the mood. It doesn't happen in the spiritual delights of a Karl Bach minion singing and dancing. That's when spiritual ecstasy may happen. And ecstasy and praise is important. But spiritual growth specifically happens when the mood isn't there. And I was thinking, why, out of all of the people in Jewish history, are we named after Yaakov, after Jacob? We could have been named after Avraham. We could have been named after Moses. I mean, of all of the people, Yaakov. And I thought of a new insight, and that is that the most marvelous things happen to Yaakov at nighttime. One time he's at nighttime, he goes to sleep and he has this amazing vision of angels going up and down the ladder. The next time he's at nighttime and he's struggling with the angel until the morning. And nighttime is always when things aren't so clear, when things are a little bit hazy. You can't see necessarily your faith before your eyes. You're not in the mood. And sometimes people define faith as living without doubt. And I heard a great rabbi say that real faith is living with the courage, having enough courage to live with the uncertainty. That the days when you don't have it, to have the courage then, at that point, I'm going to put on tefillin anyway. I'm going to go to the hospital anyway, even though it's having the courage to live with uncertainty, not faith without doubt.
Well, I'll tell you, when you say named after Jacob, we're not named Jacobites. We're named by Jacob's other name, which is Israel. And exactly for that very reason, that you're talking about when that struggle happens, when that challenge happens, that's when the growth happens. Well, Israel means to struggle with God. That sometimes in Israel, I hear us talking and like, we need to do this to make things better. We need to do that to make things better. But if we just realize that the struggle that we're going through as a nation in order to fulfill our destiny and be our best selves, this is the best struggle in the world. We should be so grateful just to be having the struggle. It's an end in and of itself for us to have the right struggle in the right way at the right times and understand that the events that we're facing and the challenges we're facing on a national, international level are orchestrated for us to be having the right struggle, the struggle within. And that's really what, Israel inspired, to struggle with God. It's an inspiring thing, and everybody does it in their own way, and nobody can judge who's struggling and who's not, what that struggle is. But we bless you all that you should have the struggle of your lives and enjoy every moment of it. Shalom, shalom.